Mount Salak, a place where legends and tragedy intertwine. Rising from the heart of West Java, this mountain has always been more than just a peak to conquer. For centuries, it has carried a reputation that chills the bones of even the bravest souls. Some call it cursed. Others say it is protected by ancient spirits that do not welcome intruders. And then, there was the tragedy. The crash that claimed lives. The whispers of rescuers who swore they heard cries in the fog, yet found no living soul when they arrived. But beyond the headlines, beyond the stories shared in daylight, lies a darker tale. The tale of a trail that locals refuse to walk after sunset. A trail where hikers vanish, where the wind carries voices that should not exist, where the forest itself seems alive. Tonight, we step into the shadow of Mount Salak, into the place where myths breathe, where the living and the dead walk the same path. It was early August when 5 friends arrived in this remote village, their eyes set on Mount Salak's highest peak. They had climbed many mountains before, Semeru, Pangrango, Ged, but never this one. The villagers, as they always do, tried to warn them. They spoke of the hidden valley, where compasses spin in madness, of voices calling your name from the fog, of a place where night falls too quickly, as if time itself bends around the mountain. But young hearts rarely listen to old fears. The group laughed off the warnings. Arya, the self-appointed leader, dismissed the stories as superstition. Sinta, the only woman in the group, felt uneasy but said nothing. Bagas, carrying his beloved camera, planned to capture every moment. Demas and Reno, the jokers of the team, filled the air with careless laughter. Before they left, the old villager stepped closer, his voice heavy with something more than concern. He told them this forest did not like arrogance, that if they heard someone calling their names, they must not answer, unless they were certain it was real. They nodded, pretending to take it seriously. But deep down, none of them truly believed. The mountain was watching them even then, and the mountain always takes what it wants. At first, everything seemed normal. The trail wound through the dense forest, silent except for the rhythm of footsteps and the occasional snap of twigs underfoot. But Bagas, the quiet one with the camera, began to notice things. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind through the trees. It was as if the entire mountain had been holding its breath. Sinta felt it too, the weight in the air, the stillness that pressed against their skin like something unseen was watching from the shadows. When she told the others, they only laughed. Arya said it was nerves. Reno and Demas cracked jokes to mask their own unease. But the uneasiness clung to them like the mist curling around the trunks of ancient trees. An hour into the hike, Demas checked his compass. The needle spun wildly before freezing again, pointing in no direction that made sense. They joked about it, calling it cheap gear, but some of them stopped laughing when Bagas pointed out that the sun's position didn't match the map either. It was the first sign the mountain was already playing with them. Then came the footsteps. At first, so faint they thought it was just the echo of their own. But as they moved faster, the sound stayed behind them. Always behind them. They turned several times, expecting to see another hiker on the trail. But the path was empty. Always empty. Sinta told the others she heard something else too. A soft whisper drifting through the trees, almost like a voice trying to call them. The group fell silent then. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. Someone was calling Arya's name. They remembered the villager's warning. Do not answer if you hear your name. For the first time since the hike began, none of them laughed. The forest felt different now, heavier, as if the trees themselves had moved closer. Hours passed, and the mountain seemed to grow darker long before nightfall. The trail, once clear and well-marked, now twisted in ways that made no sense. They walked for what felt like miles, yet when they checked Bagas's camera footage later, some sections showed the same tree again and again, as if they had been walking in circles. No one could explain it. And then, the footsteps returned. Louder this time. Heavier. Each time they stopped, the sound stopped too. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic, faint, but sharp enough to sting the nose. Boggis whispered to Arya that he saw a shadow move across the trail ahead. Tall, thin, too far to make out clearly. Arya told him it was probably just the wind, but Boggis swore there was no wind at all. They built a fire before the sun vanished completely, huddling close as the forest closed in around them. It was then they heard it, the faint, haunting sound of a gamelan. Soft notes drifting through the night air. Impossible. There was no village for miles. No road. No electricity. The music rose and fell as if carried by the wind, though the trees were still. Boggis gripped his camera, pointing it toward the sound, but the darkness revealed nothing. Cinta refused to speak. She kept her eyes on the trees beyond the firelight, watching for movement that never came, or perhaps came too quickly to be seen. Their nerves frayed as the night deepened. Demas swore he saw someone walking just beyond the edge of the firelight. A man, or maybe a woman, too far to tell. But when they called out, breaking the villagers' warning, the figure was gone. The forest answered with silence. And then, as if the mountain itself decided it had watched long enough, the wind rose for the first time all day, carrying with it a sound none of them would ever forget. Laughter. Soft, high-pitched, echoing through the trees. The kind of laughter that does not belong to anything human. The night at Gunung Salak was long. Too long. Hours passed, yet the clock on Boggis's camera insisted it was only minutes. They sat close to the fire, each afraid to speak too loudly, as if the trees themselves were listening. The wind carried fragments of the gamelan melody again, this time louder, clearer, as though the musicians stood just beyond the wall of darkness. Arya told the group he saw shadows moving in the mist. He counted at least 4. No, 5 figures, walking slowly between the trees. But when the mist thinned for a moment, there was nothing there. Boggis checked his camera screen. He whispered to the others that the lens kept glitching, sometimes showing faces behind them where there should be none. Faces pale and hollow-eyed, watching silently before fading into static. Demas wanted to leave immediately, but the trail back was gone. Every direction looked the same, only endless walls of trees and black fog. It was then that Cinta finally spoke. She told them about the old story she had heard as a child, a tale of soldiers who once vanished on this mountain, swallowed by a storm that came out of nowhere. Villagers believe their spirits still walked these slopes, guarding something, or perhaps searching for what was taken from them long ago. The air grew heavier. Even breathing felt wrong, as though the mountain itself was pressing down on their chests. And then it happened. Boggis dropped his camera. He said he saw someone behind Arya, a woman in white, hair hanging down to her waist, face hidden. She stood completely still, too still. When Arya turned, there was nothing there, but Boggis swore she was smiling. Moments later, the laughter returned. Closer now. High, distorted, like dozens of voices overlapping. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees, a scream cut through the night. A man's voice, far away, or maybe impossibly close. No one moved for several seconds, hearts pounding, until Demas grabbed his flashlight and ran toward the sound, shouting for whoever it was to answer. The others followed, but the beam of light revealed only trees and swirling mist. The screaming stopped. The forest was silent again, too silent. They found his flashlight, but not Demas. No footsteps, no sign of struggle, as if the mountain had simply erased him. After Demas vanished, panic took over the group. Their shouts for him echoed through the trees but came back distorted, like voices repeating their calls from different directions. Cinta clutched her jacket tighter. She told them not to call his name too loudly. The old tales, she said, warned never to shout in the mountains at night, or they would answer back. And then something did answer. A voice, mimicking Demas's own, called from the distance. "Here. I'm here." But the tone was wrong. Too flat. Too cold. Boggis begged them not to follow it. He said he saw movement in the fog. A row of soldiers in old uniforms, rifles slung over their shoulders, marching silently between the trees. Their faces were pale, some with hollow eyes, others with jaws hanging open as if frozen mid-scream. The figures didn't look alive, but they didn't move like the dead either. Arya whispered that the soldiers seemed to be circling them, closing in slowly, step by step. The air turned colder, biting through their jackets. The fire they left behind was gone now, swallowed by the mist, leaving only darkness around them. Cinta started chanting prayers under her breath, words trembling as though her voice alone might keep them safe. That was when Boggis's camera, still recording, caught something in the corner of the frame. A gate, old, crumbling, covered in moss. Two stone pillars rising out of the ground like the remains of some forgotten entrance. And carved into the stone, symbols no one recognized. Arya said the gate wasn't on any map. It shouldn't be here. But beyond it, through the mist, faint lights glimmered, like lanterns swaying in the wind. And then, the soldiers stopped marching. They stood facing the gate, heads bowed, as if waiting for someone or something to pass through. The fog shifted. From the darkness beyond the gate, a figure emerged. Tall, clad in what looked like the remains of a tattered officer's uniform. Its face was hidden under a wide-brimmed hat, but its movements were deliberate, heavy, as though carrying centuries of rage. Boggis whispered that its eyes weren't human. They glowed faintly in the dark. The soldiers around the gate raised their rifles in unison, but not at the hikers. No, it was as if they were saluting. The figure turned its head slowly toward the group and smiled. Then, as quickly as it appeared, everything was gone. The gate, the soldiers, the officer, only the fog remained. But Demas's voice still called from somewhere ahead, begging them to follow. Despite the terror, Arya wanted to keep moving. He thought maybe Demas was hurt, maybe he needed help. The others followed, hearts pounding, each step feeling heavier than the last. But the trail ahead looked different. Boggis said it was like the mountain had changed its shape. The same trees, the same rocks, but arranged wrong, like someone had shuffled the entire forest while they weren't looking. Cinta swore she saw shadows walking beside them, keeping pace silently in the dark. None of them wanted to look too closely. And then they found Demas, or what they thought was Demas. He was sitting there, head in his hands, whispering to himself. Arya called his name. Slowly, very slowly, the figure turned, and the face that looked back at them wasn't Demas. The skin was gray, the mouth stretched too wide, eyes completely black like two holes burned into its skull. It smiled, and in a voice that almost sounded human, it said, "I found you." Then the thing stood, its limbs bending wrong, like a puppet with broken strings. It took one step toward them, then another. The forest erupted with whispers, hundreds of voices speaking at once, too fast to understand, too loud to block out. Boggis dropped his camera. The screen cracked, but it kept recording as the group ran blindly through the dark, tripping over roots, crashing through the undergrowth. Behind them, the footsteps followed. No matter how fast they ran, the thing never seemed far behind. By the time they stumbled back to the base of the mountain, it was almost dawn. They were shaking, bleeding, covered in mud. But only 3 of them made it out. Demas was gone, and so was Boggis's camera. 2 days later, a rescue team found the camera half buried near the trail. When they played the footage, it ended with that same figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching the lens from a distance. Smiling, as though it knew someone would see it.